Welcome, brutish Gork bosses, to the ever-deadly battlegrounds of the mortal realms. Today, we are talking about the Ironjawz in our ongoing exploration of the latest Orruk Warclans battle tome, and the Ironjawz are near and dear to so many of us in Age of Sigmar because, quite frankly, in my mind, this is the moment when people really stopped and took a new look at this game called Age of Sigmar, right? Of course, I had a rough launch, but there was just something about this model line and the incredible sculpts in it and the art and the feel of it that gave people pause, and today I want to explore why, and hopefully infect you with a little love for Gork's finest. One thing I'd like to add right up top though is that if you like this video and you're interested in this faction, please consider using the affiliate link in the description down below. Noble Knight Games is a great store here in the US with discounts on all their Games Workshop products, and using that link goes a long way to supporting me, my wife, this channel. It's all life-changing stuff and I appreciate every moment of it. Now, for those of you who are new to Age of Sigmar or this particular faction, the Ironjawz are a type of Orruk that really embody the aspects of Gork specifically. We mentioned before that their deity as an Orruk race is Gorka, that it's 1 in 2. We explored yesterday with the Cruel Boys that Mork is more of the tricksy side of things, but today we're talking about Ironjawz, which really embody Gork. And his theme of brutal but cunning really shows here is that the Ironjawz are a sub-faction of Orruk that are predominantly focused on direct, head-on battle with no time for subtlety. They want massive armies, thousands of boys, meaning the generic term for orcs in any war clan, each with a hand weapon and a smile, charging at full speed. Might makes right in the traditional sense, and these orcs intend to be the mightiest. And all of that is pretty, I think, well conveyed from just the appearance of the models, right? They're huge, they're heavily armored, a lot of them are in dynamic poses like moving and vaulting towards the enemy. The bosses just look like they have a presence on the table, especially when they're riding a maw-krusha. Like, you get that sense that this is a combat army instantly by looking at them. However, there is a lot more going on here than just melee orcs, right? I said the same thing about Cruel Boys. There's always more going on than just, spooky, tricksy orcs. Here, there's a lot more than melee, because this faction has much more of an origin story than some of the others, right? Orcs are not just born Ironjawz, they are transformed into them. And the process and history that made this possible is really what sets them apart, even within their own battle tome. So let's dive into those origins. The Ironjawz began to exist around the time of the Age of Chaos, when Chaos armies entered Gur in mass. So here it's an important thing to note that I didn't really highlight in my first video on orcs in the series, is that the more an orc fights, and the longer they live, the bigger they get. Almost like they have what we would call on Earth like indeterminate growth for some species, they just keep growing bigger and bigger and bigger. Orcs have something quite similar. Well, when Chaos entered the realm of beasts, it essentially entered into a new food chain, right? Everything in Gur wants to kill you, and the forces of Chaos were not immune to this whatsoever. So as the Chaos armies are pushing and pushing against all of the forces of Gur, some of those are orcs, and some of those happen to be pretty good at staying alive. So this relentless fighting kept making these orcs bigger and stronger. And what we call the Ironjawz are simply a strength tier, I guess you could say, of orcs that have survived a ton of fights, have grown immensely in stature. And this is really important because the Age of Chaos straight up destroyed so many other factions, but here, and I used this term before, it refined one. The orcs who survived here are stronger for it, essentially because they got stronger with every battle, and Chaos created a new enemy. Or at least a new type of enemy, because the Ironjawz themselves are so much bigger and more heavily armored, they are a different kind of threat than, say, a random tribe of orcs just in the woods. They pound metal into crude armor with their fists, they use mounts aggressively, and so on. And this process can happen anywhere, it's just Gur was the first place that this kind of level was achieved. And from there, they've spread out all over the place and had more foundings, I guess you could call it. But essentially, Ironjawz can be everywhere. It's just the first instance of them was this constant refinement of fighting and surviving that took place in Gur. So even though their origin story doesn't have them being like Chaos Orcs per se or anything like that, Chaos had an integral hand in creating what we know as the Ironjaw Warclans. And so we essentially have a green mountain of beef, but how does it function as a society, right? I mean, of course, every war clan is going to have its own culture, if you were. Well, more so than any other war clan, this is a place where traditional might makes right? The biggest is the boss, but there's always someone right behind him who wants to take his place. But the Ironjawz have a bit more uniqueness to their structure, because if you look at a model like a brute, okay, that's an Ironjawz unit, that is an Ironjaw. Ardboys, which make up the little tiny orcs that are clad in way more armor, are not, sort of. Ardboys are essentially normal orcs that understand that they too can grow massive through all these battles and surviving them, and so they follow the Ironjawz, meaning the brutes and up, knowing that they're going to lead the Ardboys to many, many battles, which facilitates a chance for the Ardboys to fight and grow. And when they wear that goofy looking armor that doesn't always look like it fits them, it's because they're trying to emulate their betters. Which was sort of a weird thing when I read it in the battle tome. I mean, they are all Ironjawz from a game perspective. There's no difference whatsoever. The keyword's there, it is what it is. But as far as like in a societal level, the Ardboys are kind of cast off as the lower rung, and the goal, the embodiment of what they all want to be, is brutes, Gorgruntas, or, obviously mega bosses, things like that. So you could say that an Ironjaw Warclan is a core group of brutes with potentially thousands of acolytes or understudies in the form of Ardboys. And any orc that's smaller than you, let's say you're one of the brutes, you could look down upon them. Like, honestly, you're bigger than them. There is this sort of divide, but it's important to remember that once a fight is going and the wall is called, there are one army. Like, it's just the sheer will of Gork smashing into your opponent. But this stark difference in size and power level between, an Ironjaw and, say, an Ardboy, or I should say a brute and an Ardboy, means that this subspecies of Ironjaw's capital I has much more of a class system than any other group of orcs. There's a core group of a war boss surrounded by his brutes that cause so much havoc that is essentially magnetic for any orcs nearby. It pulls them in, but also holds them at a distance until they've earned the right to become, a brute, essentially. So their little internal society of not having a lot of Ironjawz, even though collectively they can be an Ironjaw Warclan, but it's just pulling in orcs who want to be the biggest and the bestest and the meanest. It's so cool. Now, no discussion of the Ironjawz would be complete without mentioning Gordrak, the Fist of Gork, the named hero of the Ironjawz and a war boss of legend. Okay, so he has his own little origin story, and here it is. The Ironjawz were attacking a fortress when Gorkamorka took notice and wanted to help. He essentially pulls the hand of God comes down and crushes this fortress, annihilating a huge portion of the defender's wall, and from the ash and the rubble and the smoke, a figure stood up. It was a colossal orc, even by Ironjaw's standards. And this was the birth of Gordrak. Now, this is one of the many likely incorrect origin stories, but Gordrak as a character has made sure that no one who knew him before taking the mantle of, this war boss level person has been dealt with. He's curated his own origin story. He's a figure of myth as well as power. He's exceptionally brutal, strong, and very straightforward, and he kind of sees himself as the herald of the Great War, a apocalyptic end-of-days event where all the children of Gorkamorka will bind together and crusade across the realms and tear everything apart, leaving only Gorkamorka and his kin. Which, hashtag goals. I get it. I understand. And it's hard to articulate how much of a presence he is. Like, he has the charisma to bind and direct so many warbands of different stripes. He, like I said before, is magnetic. He brings in orcs from anywhere his army crosses. It's just constantly getting bigger. And he really does seem to be the herald that he wants to be, which is important. That being said, he's not infallible, he's not invincible, he's not a god tier character, he's just an orc who means business. His relationship to Kragnos is something that hasn't really been explored really well. We got a vague sense of it in Broken Realms Kragnos, where it's just, might makes right, and as long as our goals are aligned, I'll work with you kind of a thing. But I am waiting for more novels to really explore that relationship between Gordrak and Kragnos. Now I want to end this video like I end all of them, talking about why I think this story is so freaking cool, right? I mean, again, this is just a very surface level introduction. Of course, we're going to go into the actual unit entries and things like that later on. But the Ironjawz set themselves apart with their origin story and an awesome named character. They definitely were for a while like the foremost kind of orc. Like, they released the Bone Splitters Battle Tome, and then the Ironjawz soon after, I believe. Way back in the day. I'm sorry, it's a little blurred up for me. But, the popularity of this faction was so intense that I feel like in terms of storytelling and stuff, the Ironjawz definitely became center stage when you think about orcs as a whole. And some of those older battle tomes made Gordrak seem like a deity-level character, and that's been reined in quite a bit. He doesn't seem as strong right now, but what they've really doubled down on is that he exemplifies Gork now. And honestly, I kind of like it a lot, because now we have a counterpart to that with the Cruel Boys, as we explored with their vision of Mork. But he is one very important aspect of the orcs as a species, because more than just Gordrak, the Ironjawz as a whole galvanized greenskins into a war party like no other. The other subspecies of orcs don't have anywhere near the same level of magnetism. Cruel Boys don't just randomly recruit orcs as they move around. They're born in the bayous and the swamps, and they kind of grow organically from there. Bone Splitters require like a religious experience to become them, so there's no control, but when an Ironjawz war clan moves through an area, a pounding begins in the heads of every orc nearby, and they just flock to him. So while actual, quote-unquote, Ironjawz, meaning brutes and up, the actual tier level of subspecies that makes them bigger and physically different than other orcs, those might be somewhat rare, the footprint that the capital I Ironjawz have, when you include the Ardboys and their culture and how much they spread, that footprint or impact on the realms is really some of the biggest. And it's been a hard thing to explore, just talking about like Ironjawz as a subspecies and then Ironjawz as a faction, right? As a faction, it includes Ardboys and all that kind of stuff, no question. As a subspecies, you have to look at which models are radically different, and it's so interesting to find a small niche in the realms that they just got stronger because of Chaos's entry. And that's such an interesting idea. And then the fact that everybody's like, I want to be like them, because why wouldn't you? Makes absolute sense, and I'm here for every second of it. Ironjawz are consistently fun, consistently smashy. They're a great time, and I really, really think that you will enjoy this faction when we start diving into the various units and stuff later on. But for now, I'd like to pause this video and just simply ask the question, why do you like the Ironjawz? Right? For me, it's the Mega Boss, pure and simple. I love the idea of like the might makes might, right? Rising to leadership kind of a thing, smashing other skulls. But I also like the responsibility that comes with being a war boss, that any single time the orcs are mentioned in a story, if the boss is not constantly directing them towards a fight, they're about to have like a civil war and it's all about to fall apart. So there's always this razor's edge for every Ironjawz war boss that's like constantly, we need an enemy, we need a direction, we need this. And there's just something about the drama of that particular way of being mixed with all of the other war bosses around you who just want to kill you and take your power. I really like that kind of snapshot of drama. But anyway, friends, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I look forward to catching you in my next Orruk Warclans video. Happy wargaming.